Welcome to Lead Line, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Welcome to Lead Live, weekly Wednesday broadcast for you on leadership and mindset. Today we have a very important subject in terms of an individual who's leading and leading in several different spaces. Let me introduce the topic. Choosing to be a force of nature, engineering a brighter future for people of color. Kevin Nichols, co founder, president, and chief executive officer of the Social Engineering Project, Inc., is based in Oakland. Google and Microsoft funded social impact venture with Stanford University designed to address the lack of diversity in the tech industry. This gentleman has worked in multifaceted capacities in some of the most prolific international law firms in the country, such as Morrison and Forrester, Paul Hastings, Heller Urban, and Holland and Knight. His interest in diversity and technology began while he was a mechanical engineering diversity intern at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Later, he became the executive director of California's Diversity Council and the African American Wellness Project. He attended the University of California at Berkeley. Go Berkeley. Recently completed an executive program for social entrepreneurship at Stanford's Graduate School of Business and also completed a fundraising academy through the Stanford Institute of Philanthropy at JFK University. He's become a social networking expert and full time consultant specializing in litigation technology, e discovery, diversity, and social media marketing for the legal industry. This gentleman has been featured already on LinkedIn as a Hall of Famer. Yahoo's blog, in the Examiner, CNN, Reuters, Market Watch, the Wall Street Journal. And today I'll let him tell you he's going to be on another nationwide show. Millions have seen this gentleman logging and network through the network medium we know so fondly, many of us, as LinkedIn.com, especially during the time period many years ago between 2011 and 2014. So without further ado, I want to ask you to come on and join us, Kevin. Good morning, or good afternoon now, I should say.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that lovely reiteration of my bio. I could have given you a truncated version of that, but it's all good.
Yeah, I know we could have gone on and on with regards to some of the work that you've done. And we had a rather rich conversation. And I am hoping that some of that is illuminated today because of your leadership and because of your mindset, which this show is all about. So before we get into questions, can you share with the viewing audience, those who are online now and those who are going to see this in the future as part of our uploading to various sites, a little bit about you, something that we would not find in social media, something maybe you even consider unique?
Well, I struggle with that question because what I normally tell people is that, I was on the homepage of LinkedIn from 2011 to 2014. Many people didn't know every time they put their username and password that they saw me or three other people on the homepage. But going a little bit deeper that people wouldn't necessarily know is that I actually socially kind of thrived during this COVID time because I'm really realizing that I'm much more introverted than I actually thought. I love staying at home and I watch TV a lot anyway, but really have become a movie buff and also a very very much connected to history and documentaries and things of that nature. So that's something that people probably wouldn't know because I don't really talk about that outside of with my wife.
Got it. And I've never met her, but I've heard a lot about her. You both are very special. You chose each other. You were both very smart.
Thank you
And
very much.
I'm sure you like to be affirmed, but you don't need that from me or anyone else.
Well, no, but we got married and engaged in a very public way, and so that often allows people to feel more connected to us than most. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So I want to start with the first question. And this question is important because it will set the stage for those who may not know you. Tell us about your history and help us understand why you do what you do. And you do a lot of things, and some things you're going to reveal, right?
Well, I would say that most of my number one, I'm a networker, but also just very believe strongly in relationships. So a lot of my friends I've known since some of them first grade all the way on to, high school and college that we're still very close. But people that know me from when I was a child know that I've always wanted to be, I thought I would be the first Black president of the United States. And that's what, around fourth grade, I ran my first election that I lost for school treasurer. I'm still a little bit upset about that, but but lost for that, but I realized I didn't like losing. But at the same time, I knew that there was not a president's job per se prior to being president. So I knew I had some wiggle room as far as what I could be until I ran for president. And so I actually thought about becoming a mechanical engineer because I saw that there was a lack of Black engineers particularly, but the mechanical discipline seemed to be the least likely for Black people to go into. And I thought it was an area that was much needed for Black representation. So around seventh grade or so, I decided that I would pursue engineering until I became the first Black president. So I spent my summers and weekends going to STEM-related camps at UC Berkeley. I got into a program called Summer Search in high school, and which was for backpacking outside in the wilderness. But instead of doing that, I convinced them to allow me to be the first student to actually go to school for the summer instead of an external excursion. So I went to Choate Rosemary Hall in Wallingford, Connecticut, which has been publicized a lot from the Power Show, unfortunately. But and then also went to Northwestern University's Cherub program and studied engineering there for a summer in high school. Got to college, and in the En-ROADS program, I worked at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory as a mechanical engineering intern and decided that I didn't want to be an engineer anymore. So that was pretty devastating for me, investing all of this time and energy into that. However, I felt like I wanted to do something more social justice oriented. And so my boss at the time also ran the affirmative action and diversity program there. So I was able to switch over to the AADP department and actually do diversity work for the first time. So that's where I got my feet wet into diversity and thought about it as an opportunity to progress, but there weren't any jobs really in diversity at that time. So after I finished Cal, I decided I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and that would be a good career to go into before becoming president. So I ended up working at a law firm called Morrison & Forster, and I came in mid-level. So I came in as a paralegal. So I would work with the attorneys and the partners, as well as the case assistants and secretaries, to understand the ins and outs of the law firm, understand the bureaucracy that existed, but also understand how a large law firm operates. So when I ran my own small civil rights firm, that I would take those skills with me and be more efficient as a solo practitioner or a small firm. And also I'm a Kappa. So at that time, John Burris, as well as Johnny Cochran, were at the top of their game in civil rights litigation. So that they were like my mentors and people who I looked up to and emulated. After a couple of trials and a couple of years at Morrison and Foerster, though, I decided that I didn't want to practice law either. And it was just more of a quality of life thing. I saw people working 12 to 14-hour days, and it didn't seem as though that was something that really inspired me, that quality of life work, wanting to have a family, wanting to get married, et cetera. So I ended up deciding to stay into the legal industry until I figured out what I wanted to do until then. I also decided, and got turned off by politics as well, that I didn't necessarily want to run for president anymore. But one good thing about that was that I've lived my life in a way such that I was always under a microscope, and I felt like whatever I did, the decisions that I made, the choices that I made, could harm me somewhere down the line if I ever chose to run. So that's kind of how I lived my life as a kid all the way through. So that's why I kind of feel as though I've been unscathed with a lot of scandals or things of that nature, because I tried to avoid those things as possible. I stayed in the legal industry for about 12 years and ended up getting into diversity there. I saw that law firms had on their website diversity, equity, and inclusion, or they talked about pro bono work. But at the end of the day, a lot of people weren't doing pro bono, and the only diversity that I saw was in the mailroom. So I ended up going into these law firms, creating diversity programs and helping them with recruiting and retaining diverse talent. I also ended up getting back involved into technology and was an expert in what they call electronic discovery, which is the tech side of the legal practice. So in a way, I came in full circle and started the social engineering project, what we'll talk about a little bit later.
Yes.
But essentially, the name of the organization comes from a quote from Charles Hamilton Houston, who said, "A lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society." So technically, I'm not a lawyer, and technically, I'm not an engineer. But the way that I look at the quote is for everyone to look at whether or not they're part of the problem or part of the solution. So I created an organization about 5 years ago that's designed to address the lack of diversity in the tech industry by creating pipeline programs for young people and also consulting with tech companies on recruitment, retention, and other diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. And then we can talk more about my work in STEM with my business partner, Dr. Brian Brown.
Yeah, this is a perfect slight transition. I want to emphasize to people who are viewing and listening that this gentleman, like so many of our guests, is quite humble, and that comes with being an introvert in part, but I think it comes from a higher calling, recognizing that he's not the end all be all, but he has a vision, and that vision is critical. And the way he functions within society is to call forth that vision. And individuals that I have observed who are effective leaders, who really make a transformative impact on an organization, on individuals, on communities, on society, they do come across as humble, and they are in fact humble. And so for that reason, I was talking to a dear one who has been one of my clients, but more importantly, she's been more impactful in the lives of university students as well as community college students. And she's driven too. And I asked her to join us briefly, just to say a few words to honor this gentleman. I don't normally do this, but I thought this would be perfect. And so we're going to surprise Kevin. He has no idea. So join us, Rashida, please.
I saw her in your promo video. I said, "No, Elnora." So I was like, "Okay, here we go." No, I'm surprised. I was going to tell you, I recognize some people in there. So,
wonderful. So, Rashida, what would you like to share with Kevin?
Well, first of all, thank you for all of your support that you've provided through the years. So the reason why this came to be, this moment came to be, is because Elnora was telling me that she was interviewing you. And I was like, okay, Kevin Nichols is one of the most consistent people that I've ever come across. From the moment you and I had our first conversation about at the very start of Represented, you just were very helpful and introducing me to opportunities, offering to teach workshops, coming to support our events. And, I've always been impressed by that level of consistency and that like dedication and commitment to your community. So thank you, Dr. Webb, for inviting me to thank Kevin for all of his support. And thank you, Kevin, for doing what you do. And I just want you to know that it does not go unnoticed.
Thank you so much, Rashida. And we did probably reconnect as adults on the hiking trail. So that's a fun fact.
That's true. That's true.
And number two, Rashida is one of those that I can never say no to. So unfortunately, I'm indebted to her. Whenever she needs me,
unfortunately,
I'm just like, okay, Rashida, what do you do? You know, I got your back. So she's
okay, then I will
everybody.
Okay, she's going to remember that too.
I tell her frequently, so she will.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Right. I know you're busy, so we will take you offline, but thank you.
All right. Thanks. See y'all later.
Absolutely. So that was a treat that I wanted to share with you. And I also wanted to share with the audience, Kevin, because it's one thing to hear someone talk about what they do and why they do it. It's another thing to hear someone else speak of you and your history, your longevity in this space and how you engage, and it's unconditional. You don't say, okay, what are you going to pay me or what are you going to do for me tomorrow? You even say that you owe her more. The more you invest in her, the more you believe you owe. She's never said that to you. I know. And yet whenever she's needed you, and I've heard this from other people, you just immediately stop what you're doing and respond. You don't react like I'm busy. You respond in a very leadership, humble way. And I don't mean to be redundant yet. Yeah, actually, I do mean to be redundant, to emphasize, for emphasis.
Well, so, part of that comes from, teaching. I teach branding and networking to people. And so I teach people that it's okay to say no, but everyone as a human being is just entitled to a response, to give them the courtesy of acknowledging that they requested something from you and that you respond. I believe that if I teach that, then I have to actually practice that as well. And that's what I believe leadership is, and people will say it's not, if it's spam and it goes in my spam folder, I don't respond, but if you reach out to me and take the time and energy to do that, I at least feel as though the common courtesy would be able to tell you, yes, that's possible, or no, it's not.
That reminds me of going to a dentist and interviewing different dentists. The first thing I do is I look at their teeth, right? Or going to see someone who specializes in the health of the eyes. I look at that person's eyes. I ask them some questions about their own eyes to get a sense. And of course, if the teeth appear to be rotten, that's not going to be my dentist. If the eyes seem to be impaired and they're not doing anything about it, that will not be my eye doctor. So in the same way, you live what you deliver as resources to individuals, whether it's freely, whether it's being compensated, however it's done. And that's part of the value of you, not the whole value, but that's part of the value of you. And so I'm honored to have you on here. So let's go to another question and highlight for us. There's so much happening in society. You're living it and you're dealing with it in ways that you haven't even described yet. Describe why leadership is important in these particular areas, and I'm going to name them. Corporate diversity, equity, inclusion. So why? Especially for public firms. I would say public and private, but especially for public firms that are serving the public. United States politics. Why is it important for us to have a Black Indian vice president or another person of color in the future in the role of vice president or in the role of president? Why is it important to have that leadership within our own wellness and the wellness of communities and society at large? I know these are big questions, and yet I know you can handle them in very simple and elegant ways.
Well, I'll take corporate diversity first, and primarily technology, because technology drives the world economy. It has for the last 30 plus years, and particularly with social media and the ability to reach customers the manner that we are. It's incredibly important to have diversity, equity, inclusion as a forefront when it comes to thinking about corporate diversity, because a lot of the economy is kind of built on Black culture. I mean, the things that companies are selling or buying, they're using Black athletes, they're using Black entertainers to endorse these products, these services, and we're the consumers of a lot of this. However, when it comes to boardrooms or senior leadership diversity, et cetera, we represent 1 to 2% of those people. But people are making decisions about the things that we're creating, we're innovating. So it's kind of a really disheartening scenario when you look at what's going on in our current world. And now everyone is finally getting it after the death of George Floyd, how important, how necessary it is to have representation. What that representation does for immediately for Black and brown people who are actually working at these companies for their families, but how that also impacts their communities and their next generation. And so there are a lot of different issues. I mean, I could spend that question talking about that alone, but that just sets the table, so to speak, of the issues that are present with that regard. Mm-hmm. For politics, for me, I always learned, particularly, that politics is just an allocation of resources and power. And so if you're not
let's go back here. Politics is just an allocation of resources, including power.
So if you're not at the table negotiating where the resources go or how the power structure is going to be shared, et cetera, then you basically don't exist. And so as a country, and particularly as Black people, we need to be involved in decision making. And so for me, when I decided I didn't want to run for president anymore, I figured, and I saw how easy it was to just cripple or get rid of a candidate by one smear or one negative campaign towards them. So I was like, it's a lot
independent harder. Of whether it's factually correct.
All right, it's a smear. It doesn't matter whether if it's legitimate or not. It's just a smear. And when I saw that, I said, it's a lot harder to take out one person who's behind the scenes responsible for 10 people running for office or running for. So it's a situation where it was a numbers game for me. I also looked at it and I will give credit to my cousin, Dr. Michael Elnora, who basically told me at a very young age, he says, Kevin, I see all that you're doing in the community. I love it. I see a lot of the volunteer work you do. He says, but he said that you can't help someone else if you're broke. So what that communicated to me at a young age till now was that I have to develop value for what it is that I do, and to be able to garner resources in order to support myself financially to be able to do the work that I do. And so it doesn't come for free. There's a cost to it. So my goal really is to go out and empower communities to stay involved and take advantage of what's happening. There are a lot of different, currently right now, down the ballot, city council, mayors, these local elections that are taking place. A lot of people don't even know who these people are that are running, that are going to represent them, school board, et cetera. So I created organizations like the Bay Area Black Professionals Group on LinkedIn and on Facebook, et cetera, to disseminate information about things like this that are happening, of candidates forum or something, so that people can find out what's happening, who is going to represent them or possibly represent them. And rather than seeing a ballot and saying eeny, meeny, miny, mo on a candidate, really having some context, being able to see who this individual is, hear their views, and whether or not those views represent their values. So for me, I look at myself as a conduit of sharing information in order to empower people. I'm also involved in organizations like Emerge, which helps women run for office. I've been a Men of Emerge fundraiser for many years through that. And then I also contemplated, and I'm involved with what's it called? There are so many different organizations that I align myself with, but there's a PAC in DC for African Americans running for office that I have been involved in, and I believe that it's imperative to have people, Black people particularly, understand and learn how to run for office and where to spend their money and resources and getting their name out. I help candidates out with branding and networking, and I used to, I've been on the national finance committees for various people running for office and raising money for them. So that's kind of the political discussion, I guess, part. And the last piece to what you've asked me about was the personal and collective wellness. And the co-founder of an organization called Family Wellness Group that I started with Kevin Benson, a good buddy of mine here in the Bay Area. And our goal really is to get people out into the environment, particularly the wilderness, and go in a safe, understand and learn about the wilderness in a safe way by hiking, very often, usually each weekend, pre-COVID at least, camping, ski trips, things of that nature, and making it safe so that Black people are not afraid to socialize and network, but also get out on trails, know that when you leave, you're going to come back safely, et cetera. And so the African American Wellness Project organization I used to run is Dr. Elnora's nonprofit. I'm very tuned into the disparities that exist for African Americans in health, and do what I can to educate people about the healthcare system, and to get people enrolled into things like Covered California and understand what the benefits are of having healthcare coverage.
I think some people may be listening to you and say, what is this guy not doing? And how does he have enough time in a day? And the reality is what you put your mind to and what you focus on is what you create, right?
Yes. And at the end of the day, people are paralyzed because they think that they have to create and do something overnight, or it takes, one day and all of a sudden they've done X, Y, and Z. I've been doing this stuff for all my life. So it's not anything that's new or time consuming if you spread it out over a period of years. So I don't do all this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but I've built a mechanism to be able to contribute in these buckets of things that I'm involved in as time permits.
You mentioned Dr. Michael Elnora. Did I pronounce your cousin's name correctly?
Correct.
It's a remarkable medical doctor, but much, much more. Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned in our private conversation the power of particular individuals who were, in fact, trailblazers and their influence on you as a child. Mm-hmm. So by your mentioning your cousin makes me think about Huey Newton, Stephen Biko, Malcolm X. Can you talk about those individuals who, with teams of individuals, organized and brought to large groups of individuals, the society at large, a completely different set of paradigms to consider? Speak to that in terms of leadership and how that impressed upon you, your capacity, and where you're at right now.
Well, I'll say the long and short of it is that, I've actually lived longer than I thought I would have. And part of that has been, when I grew up as a child, I saw leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, et cetera, get assassinated for speaking truth to power, not being afraid to organize and to speak out against oppression or what is right and what was just. And so for me, I felt as though my calling was very similar. I didn't know why, but I felt that I wasn't going to not speak up. I wasn't not going to organize, and I wasn't going to improve the quality of life for people that look like me and their descendants. So by
going to do that, you were not, you
as a child, I saw that that's what I was going to do,
got it.
and I didn't see any evidence that people that did stuff like that lived too long. So it was kind of weird. I was a little morbid, earlier on in my adult life, thinking that, hey, you're a great person. Like, don't get too close to me. I don't think I'm gonna be here for a while. But after a while, I figured, hey, I'm still here. I'm flying low enough below the radar, that I'm okay. Now, Elnora, you might have me, you might be knocking on my door or something after this interview. But for the most part, I've been able to, lie low, but still organize, because at the end of the day, you can call me executive director, you call me president, CEO, you call me all different titles you like. I'm just an old-fashioned community organizer. And for me, all I do is use a systems thinking approach to get the powers that be in the same room, having conversation about problems, big problems and issues, and coming up with solutions with representation of those individuals at the table, voicing their concerns and opinions. So, and at the end of the day, that's what I do.
There's so many ways to organize, and there's so many ways to convey one's voice. There's the protest approach, which, independent of whether you like it, it has its impact. There is the working within an organization approach to change the nature of policy, whether it is an elected official or a CEO of a corporation or an individual who's running some major nonprofit. Why have you chose to lead the way you led, and maybe get a little bit more concrete? No, you didn't know you were going to live this long. Yes, you had some people who inspired you, but really, what gets you up in the morning? What is it that leads you to stay on this path or compels you to stay on this path?
Because I believe in the fact that I can make a difference, and I believe that what we are doing collectively is making a difference. I do see, I hear from our students, I hear from our students' parents, thank you for sharing this information. My son or daughter did X, Y, and Z because of your information. Or, I've seen, my son is now, or my daughter is now, an engineer, or, these kinds of things that, what measuring whether or not you're making a difference. Having Rashida come on and speak, about, we met on a hiking trail, and talk. She said she was doing this or needed this. I said, done, and that's kind of, how I know and believe in this work. But I also know that I'm not alone. And I do see that there are younger people, even when I disseminate information, people are watching very carefully what I share and why I share it. I don't get in, some people go online and in these Google groups arguing about different theories, race theory and things like that, or on Facebook. And so I don't get involved in discussions, I just share information, and then also try to get as many people involved in issues that concern them. And hopefully by them getting involved, that's going to improve their family, their surrounding community, and hopefully, like I said, impact the next generation.
Got it. I think we have some additional questions. Jack, can you pull up at least one of them? And let's go to that. I am a young man. How do I get and stay inspired, especially with all the negative stuff that hits me daily?
Well, what I would say about that is you have to monitor your social media intake, number one, because it can get you down, especially if you are vocal and you have people responding to what your outbound communications are negatively. I can see how, for me, my blood pressure rises when I have to educate someone on, the history of racism, or, what a microaggression is, or something like that. And after you've explained it, there's pushback and there's commentary. That makes my blood boil. I can feel my heart rate getting high, and these volatile issues will definitely keep you down. So you have to put it all in perspective and have balance. But secondly, it's a challenging time right now because we are being less social, especially with COVID. We have to be, away from people, keeping social distance. So a lot of people are turning to their phones and turning to social media as their only outlet. So that's why I think it's important to have balance in going outdoors whenever possible when it's safe, wearing a mask, particularly with N95s, with all the fires, et cetera, that are happening. But being able to be outdoors and socialize with real human beings is where you kind of get your sources, finding out what other people are going through, what their problems are and issues are, what commonalities you have. And then you don't feel like you're alone, and that perhaps you guys can work together at improving something. That's where I find that there's hope. And that's where I find that you can make a difference. The more people that share your views and get behind you.
Love it. Hope. Investing in something you value that helps to generate a healthier perspective.
Yeah.
And emotional well-being, where you're adding value. Another question, Jet. Do you have some pointers for me to move forward as a Black man in this country? As I think about that question, I think about all the harm that's done explicitly to Black men, whether it is just ignoring Black men or the other extreme of killing Black men.
That's a good question. For me, I struggle because number one, I always want to think safety first, and that means for me, having no ego when it comes to preserving your life. And as a Black man, particularly, we have to protect ourselves because we have to also protect our family. And sometimes people having a hot head or responding to the world the way that the world responds to us puts us in a very vulnerable situation. And so what I would say is there's no better time to be a Black man in this country than right now. I would say the world is watching. Every company in America is trying to bring on a chief diversity officer, try to figure out how to provide more equity towards you. I would say take advantage of that. I would say make sure that you have skills. Make sure that you have something of value that you can offer to an organization or to a company, that you can take that information and take that experience, take that revenue, take whatever it is that you can get, bring home to your family, bring home to your community, and let's put our heads together to work on trying to improve the conditions of our community and have a united front when it comes to issues that concern us as a people.
Excellent. Next question. As a young man, how do I get and stay inspired, especially with all the negative stuff that hits me? I think we had this one. I think there's another one, Jet. Oh, I keep hearing about leadership, and my examples are not good. What's an example I can follow?
Well, many people will have different opinions about the legacy of Barack Obama. But what I would say is Barack Obama is an excellent example of what a leader should be.
Right.
There are so many reasons, but particularly in that negative world that we just talked about, being able to rise above negativity, to avoid getting in the weeds or in the mud when it comes to people who have negativity, and to be able to represent himself and his family and our country in such a way with no scandals, no, infidelity issues, or any of the things that the stereotypes of Black men, particularly, or Black people in general, that he was able to kind of shrug off. It is amazing. But then also, in contrast to that, you don't have to be a Harvard law grad or, Ivy League school person in order to be able to be a role model or a leader as well. I'm from the Bay Area, born and raised, and I grew up in a small town called El Cerrito. I try to put it on the map as much as possible, but I'm a suburb, of Oakland. I grew up, everything I did was in Oakland. And although I've only lived in Oakland, for a couple of years before I moved out of to another suburb, my office is in Oakland for a reason. I am born and raised in the Bay, and I'm very proud of that. And so I don't have, all these, extra letters after my name, et cetera. All I know is that, I'm an organizer. I can get things done, and I don't need to ask anyone's permission in order to do it. And so in that regard, I can compete with whomever it is that I'm talking to or whatever it is that I'm doing. And I can let my record stand for me as opposed to having to tout it myself.
Awesome. I think there's another question, Jet.
Same one.
Yeah. Well, as he's looking for that fourth question, I'm inspired by your calmness in the face of so much that has led to too many of our professional men and women to disengage, and for that matter, just in general, whether they're professional or not. There's so much going on. There's COVID-19. If you're in California, there are these fires. I have loved ones who had to leave their home yesterday. There's killing of men and women, Black bodies, individuals, human beings. And when we think we're done, we turn on the news, look at YouTube, you look at Facebook, and there's another one. It's distressing. And so, yes, turn things down, turn them even off, and regulate. And yet at the same time, I'm one that never looked at the video of Mr. George Floyd being killed. I couldn't handle that. The fact that I could feel it energetically was woefully too much. It was more than enough and too much. Having that image in my head would have taken me out. So, and yet you are working in spaces where you have to be aware of the news. You choose to be in a way that's regulated, and you're still moving seemingly with ease. And yes, we know that, thank goodness you have a wife, you've got other family members who can help ground you if you lose that grounding. How do you stay grounded in the face of so much? And there's so many folks who are living right now who don't even know what's going to happen next week because they've not had enough income. They were removed from roles they were performing quite well because the businesses have gone out. There's insufficient resources for those families, and they number in the millions across this country alone, let alone outside the U.S. And yet, knowing all this stuff, how do you stay on track and move and not get overwhelmed by those factual realities?
It's the only way that I can explain it is being nimble and being able to pivot quickly. I'm a planner, and unfortunately, that comes to my detriment at times. But I watch a lot of news. I watch a lot of things that are happening, current events wise, and I'm also very nimble, as I mentioned. And so, for an example, I recognized that early on this year, February, March, that the likelihood of us being able to have our annual Science in the City summer day camp for 5th and 6th graders at Stanford University would not most likely happen. Well, am I going to wait to the summer to figure out what to do? So immediately got with our partners at SLAC, which is the linear accelerator on campus, who are with our partner, to come up with a virtual science camp for 5th and 6th graders that we were able to open up to the entire nation through a partnership with the National Society of Black Engineers. And we're able to have kids from all over the country learn about COVID research through physicists and engineers, and what they were studying and what information that big biotech companies were utilizing with their lasers to look at and examine the virus and understand what it actually does to the human body. So these are kinds of things that we were able to not only pivot early on, but also to be able to garner national recognition through press releases and marketing about a national program. Now we're not located or solely here in the Bay Area anymore. It was an opportunity we used to create our name recognition, our brand recognition, and ultimately open us up for further programs and other things that we can do on a larger scale. So we were fortunate in that regard.
Go ahead. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, even though I did. I just want to emphasize, you took a challenge, a problem, a concern, and you literally immediately looked at the opportunity. Even before you understood the opportunity fully, you said there's a solution. So you started with, let's figure out a solution, and that solution led to an opportunity for more young people across the country. Voila.
There's always a solution. The problem is whether or not you're going to be the one to come up with it.
Yes.
And that's how we become agile. That's how we never become complacent or comfortable. And we're always ready to pivot when we see the time is right.
Zerica Mitchell writes amazing.
Thank you.
And I can imagine, after these shows, I typically get text, emails, and even calls from people who are looking, who are viewing, and they'll say, I didn't want to say anything because I just don't want to be on air. But I got to tell you, that was great. So I'm expecting the same. And thank you, Zerica, for highlighting that. I understand from Jet, that was the last question. So let me ask you another question, because I think this may be insightful for a lot of people, especially young people. Now, you're not very young. You're not in your teens or in your 20s. You're older, and you're not as old as I in your 60s. And yet, I think people can relate to you because that's what a lot of young people are doing. They're relating to you. They don't invest in this social engineering project because it's a great idea. People connect with people, right? That's what you're talking about in terms of branding. You've got to brand yourself to the other person. And how do you do that? You make yourself relatable. You make yourself open, accessible. You give people what they need. It's not about the self. It's about the individual you're serving. So you're serving a lot of young people. What would you say to any young person, especially a person of color, Black, Latina, Native American, Asian, Pacific Islander, groups that I've not mentioned, Indian from India, not just lumped in terms of Asians, and of course, whites, especially those who are economically and educationally disadvantaged, like so many others, Blacks, Latinos, Native Americans, Asians, Pacific Islanders. What would you say to them that would compel them to do what you've done, not in your way, because everyone has their own way, to find that vision that inspires them, that gets them up in the morning? In your case, it's knowing that you can make a difference and you're doing it. And then you have evidence of it and it reinforces. What would you say to those individuals?
Well, I would ask them what their belief system is. For me, I believe in God. I'm Catholic. I practice Catholicism. So that's another source of my motivation. I know that Jesus was a common person, and that those who live like they're the first will be the last, and those who live the last will be first. So as we all do this politics thing, and we look at the nation, and we have the one percenters and all this other stuff, at the end of the day, that doesn't mean anything. That's not our purpose of why we're here in this world. And so the sooner people figure out what their purpose is, the faster and easier they will feel comfortable with leading the charge and being in control over their lives. And so for me, I think that I found that out at a very young age, what I wanted to do. And because of that, I lived my life accordingly. So I've been doing this for a long time. I'm not a spring chicken, so to speak, as you mentioned. However, I try to hold on to my youth as much as possible.
Yeah, ditto. Well, let me ask you. I've been going nonstop asking you questions. Is there anything that I've not asked you that you would want folks, not only in this country, locally across the nation, but also in other countries? We have individuals who are viewing from out of country on a regular basis. What would you want to tell them about life and about their capacity that goes beyond just having that vision that they're wedded to, that they're emotionally connected to, they invest in, and they actualize because it's so part of their heart-mind connection? What else would you tell them about life, especially given the constraints that many of us are experiencing? And I'm thinking about how you took that challenge and you morphed it into something that is actually a national resource. What would you tell them about their capacity to work through, to live through this time and be part of the solutions that
Well,
we
there are two things that I always end my presentations when I'm teaching branding and networking that I think are relevant to those questions. One is, if you find your passion, you never work a day in your life.
Hmm.
And then number two is, service is the rent that you pay here on earth. So
Say that
those
again.
two
Say
things,
the last one again.
service is the rent that you pay here on earth.
Service is the rent that you pay here on earth.
Right.
Mm.
So if you are trying to decide what it is that your purpose in life is, the sooner you find that out, the better. And if you're doing what you're called to do, it doesn't feel like work. I don't dread getting up every day, and I don't dread not making an impact and making a difference in my community. Whereas some people are not able to do that, and haven't figured out a way to do that yet. So the goal really is to find that out. And then also the service part is, we're so worried about ourselves that we neglect or forget about what it means to be a servant leader. And I know that all the things that are coming to me, or that have come to me, that I've benefited from, have been because of the fact that I have unselfishly served other people and put other people's needs before my own. And that's what I believe that I'm called to do as a Christian, but also that's just how I feel my calling is and my purpose. So those kinds of things, I think incorporating that in your daily life will get you to the success that you're describing.
Awesome. Olive writes, thank you, Dr. Webb, for another valuable broadcast. This is great information. Thank you, Olive, for being here weekly. Yeah, let me tell you, Kevin, Mr. Nichols, I just thank you for choosing to be who you are, choosing to function in various spaces. Many you shared with us, not all of them. You don't need to share all of them. That's part of you keeping yourself rich in various spaces. Thank you and your wife for adding value to society in ways that affects all of us, even if we never get to meet you. That's the power of leadership, folks. When we're doing what we need to do, we act it's additive as servant leaders. And servant leaders come in so many diverse forms, not only in terms of gender, ethnicity, age, areas of focus. Diversity in our servant leadership actually ensures a very healthy, um, engaging society. And we need more servant leaders to do just that, to add value. So, Kevin, I want to thank you for preparing generations of new servant leaders who don't think of the title servant leader. Yet as they're using their tools, their technical skills, their knowledge, they're energetic forces, they're adding value to the rest of life itself. And we need that. And I firmly believe that this chaos of 2020 we've been experiencing is preparing us for something great. And we're the antidote that we're looking for. We're the solutions. So let's move ahead in that regards. And so East Oakland Switchboard writes the lack of comments as a compliment. So he wants you to know that, Mr. Nichols. They just want to hear. They don't want to ask questions or make comments. And Mr. Nichols is well spoken, very full of consideration. All we can do as viewers is take notes and pay close attention. I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Well, one parting thing that I would like to say before we end is just really about networking and the power of it, because
Hmm.
I think a lot of people take it for granted, but now it's more important than ever to leverage the relationships we had pre-COVID and continue in this virtual environment of being able to facilitate introductions for people that need things. A lot of people are being laid off right now. And a lot of people are applying to jobs or trying to switch careers, et cetera, in order to provide for their families. It's very important to be able to leverage the relationships that people have. So I invite everyone who's listening to this program to join one of or both of my LinkedIn groups, the Bay Area Black Professionals Group or the Downtown San Francisco Networking Group. There we hold a monthly meeting called Morning Cup of Java for the downtown group and Reciprocity for the Black group. And essentially they do the same exact thing, but it's a referral-based monthly meeting every third Friday of the month where we talk about things that we're trying to do, people who we need to meet, and whether or not people are able to facilitate those introductions. So please join in and be a part to either, if you don't need any introductions but are willing to help and offer your contacts to other people, or you need those requests, please consider joining and being part of the community and part of the solution to this problem.
Excellent. And I want to say with that, we will have a subsequent broadcast that's focused on masterminding. And what Kevin is speaking to is the power of others who have insight, expertise, and connections that each one of us needs in order to take whatever it is that we want to do or experience to the next level. And so I don't care when you hear someone say, I did it all myself. I became a billionaire all on my own. No one does anything alone. Even if we're not aware of who is on the other end, who's created the technology that we're able to use in order to advance a product or a service. We all need others. So with that, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate you having me on your broadcast. And hopefully it was worth your while.
Oh, that's an understatement. And it would be an honor to have you come back and maybe be part of that team of people who talk about masterminding.
Excellent. Well, I can't tell you no either. So keep me abreast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So I want to share with the rest of you, thank you for being here and leverage what Kevin offered. I'm certain that you will find it invaluable, not just valuable, but invaluable. And moving forward, we've got our next broadcast next week, thanks to Melody. And she will be wowing our audience. And she's going to be talking about the importance of how we prepare our voice. Public speaking, whether it's through the use of the virtual resource that we have, or even in person, how to leverage your voice to really have an impact on your audience. So join us as we welcome Melody Kilmer Harper. This woman was known many years ago, her and her twin sister, actresses in Hollywood, and some of the the classic shows that people used to see, or movies. And so she may share a little bit of that with us. And that's part of how she got her training through working with people like Johnny Carson and others. But I'll let her share more. So join us next week. Should be another insightful leadership mindset related session. Thank you so much for being here.